Welcome to Zoom O'Clock with your host, Tessie Anthony de Nassau. This podcast brings you enlightening discussions with leading experts and public figures directly to your ears.
Good afternoon, Dr. Farah Nadeem. How are you?
I'm good, Tessie. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for your time here on Zoom O'Clock today. For the wonderful people out there listening to this who don't know Dr. Farah yet, Dr. Farah Nadeem is an expert in FGM, female genital mutilation. You have been speaking in the House of Lords. You have been writing a book about it. You are an advocate for it. You speak out about it a lot. And you're also a therapist, a psychologist. And we have been working as well already in the past together. And it's just such a pleasure to talk to you about FGM today because it's such an important topic and it's still going on everywhere around the world. But that's enough for me to explain about your work. Can you please tell us all a bit about your work? What is FGM really? And why is it important to talk FGM still today?
Well, FGM is child abuse. And usually the perpetrators are the mother and the father who actually take their daughters to have this act done. It is, I think the difficulty with FGM is that a lot of people see it as a cultural issue rather than it being a global issue. Research now in 2020 have noticed that 90 countries around the world actually do FGM. So what I mean by do FGM is do the cut. So girls get cut. What is FGM? I think we need to make it clear around what FGM actually is. So FGM is a procedure that's done, it's not medical, and it's usually done with someone who is not trained. So in some instances where I've worked with FGM survivors, they've had a woman who they call a witch doctor, which it doesn't mean that they're anyone, or it could be someone from their community. And I think one in particular that I remember was where she smashed a bottle and used a smashed bottle to remove parts of the young girl's vagina. What usually happens is 4 different types. There's one where there's a prick, type 1 is very kind of minute. Type 2 is they take some part of the labia out. Type 3, which is the main common one, which actually happens where they take the clitoris out, so that the girl doesn't have sexual pleasure, and they sew the vagina up that you only have about this much space. And there's been a lot of complications for young girls where they've had their periods, where they've turned into tumours, periods have not been released, so many of the complications. Sex was described as more painful than being pregnant or giving birth. So that usually the common type of FGM is the type 3. So this has become a very global issue now. So 200 million girls have had FGM done to them. In the UK alone, around 137 girls have had the cut. And when I mean the cut is actually, the removal of the clitoris and the vagina being sewed up. So it's literally like, we could show pictures later through this interview, but it'd be interesting. You could see that it's completely sewed up and all that's left is this amount of space. So when you think about it, FGM is something that isn't needed. It's harmful. It's a harmful practice, and it's seen as child abuse. Here in the UK, the first conviction happened last year in 2019 in February, and it was of a young girl who was, I think, at the time 2 and she became 4, and it was the first conviction ever. And I think both parents mother got the most amount. I think she got 14 years imprisonment, and that was the first conviction ever. But it was made illegal here in the UK in 1989, and then the law changed in 2003, but it still was illegal from that point. So actually the world was aware of female genital mutilation in 1989. Here in the UK it used to happen, not just, I know at the moment it's seen as a lot of people have denounced it as an African issue and said that it's more in African Muslim countries, but here in the UK it used to happen in the early 1900s in asylums where women used to masturbate, and masturbation was seen as a form of, deviation for a woman. And they used to remove the clitoris then, and that's seen as like female genital mutilation at that point as well. And then, we know that it originated from, research shows that it's originated from Egypt when it was mummification stage. But now it's kind of become a norm around millions, not millions, but 90 countries. And 200 million women have had this done, and the prevalence rate is very high when it comes to FGM. So even now, currently, when it comes to WHO and UNICEF, they've got research here that's saying that the highest rate at the moment is Malaysia. And then we've got Egypt, and we've got Sudan, Sierra Leone. So loads of different countries that are still very high, that the prevalence rate is so high, a large percentage of the countries that have it. And even in Europe, we've got, women at risk that currently have it. We have Ireland, 1 to 11%. We've got Italy, 15 to 24%. We've got Belgium, 16 to 27% at risk of having FGM done. Greece, 25 to 42% of women who are from the FGM community are at risk of having FGM done. Cyprus, 12 to 17%. Malta, 39 to 57%. And France, 12 to 21%. So that's Europe alone. So, Europe alone.
If I can interrupt you 1 second, I think that it's just really unacceptable numbers, first and foremost.
Yeah.
But you didn't mention Luxembourg. I'm from Luxembourg. Tell me about Luxembourg and what is the issue with the statistics from there?
So at the moment, we do know in 2016, we know that it is occurring in Luxembourg. There is a migration towards Luxembourg, and there's research about migration, people from different cultures, different countries that have migrated to Luxembourg. Unfortunately, there's not enough statistics when it comes to Luxembourg for us to say and quantify it and say, this is the percentage rate. There's not even research around Luxembourg and, asylum. There's not even research around the stuff that's happened, so we've got research around women that seek asylum because of FGM. We don't have anything like that in Luxembourg. We don't have literally anything where I can say this is the percentage of women in Luxembourg that have had FGM done, or how many are at risk. There's nothing there. We do know it does happen in Luxembourg, but that's about it. So there's not enough for me to say, hey, this is what I found and this is what it says about Luxembourg. But, this is estimated 600,000 women have had FGM in Europe.
A year.
So, yeah. Not in a year since 2016. So not, or so far at the moment, the research now has said 600,000. But you have to understand, FGM is a hidden population issue. And what do I mean by hidden population? Is they're not only covered by culture, it's hidden within families. I know women that have had this done in forests, in places where they've been taken in, Western countries, and they've had this done where the community takes them. We've had people who've said this happened in churches, mosques. So it's not just a Muslim issue or
so important that you say that it is not just a Muslim religious thing, and also that it's not just an African cultural thing, because a lot of people I have spoken to, and I have spoken up publicly against FGM many times with the UN and also in other conferences. It's really important that people understand FGM is also practiced by Roman Catholics. It's also practiced by atheists. It's also practiced by Buddhists. It's also practiced by people of all faith, all color, and all culture. So that means that it's not just African states doing that. And I think people need to really, really start acknowledging that.
Well, currently now in 2020, the highest prevalence rate is in Malaysia, 90%. So the highest prevalence rate is in Malaysia, then it's Somalia. So, if you think about it, okay, Malaysia is not it's an Asian country. So I think there really needs to be a conversation. The research out there at the moment is of 31 countries, and predominantly 27 of them are African countries. So the prevalence rates and a lot of the research is for, those countries. But, there's 90 countries altogether that actually had FGM done. And I think women are at risk of having FGM, and 90 countries where FGM is committed. So I think there really needs to be a conversation around that. And when it comes to Islam, I think the most important thing here is that it's not part of the religion. That's a myth. It actually isn't part of the religion. It is something that's originated from men to control women. It is something about power and to reduce sexuality. That is a fact, but there is nothing where it says in the Islamic religious scriptures this has to be done to Muslim girls. It's against the religion because it's a harm to children. And I think this is where there's a lot of myths about why FGM has happened. And my own research reflected on how do we therapeutically work with the psychological aftermath. How do we work with women who have had FGM done? What do we need to be mindful about psychologically more than the physical aspect? Physical aspect, I think there's loads of work and a lot of research on that. But when it comes to the psychological aftermath, there isn't much. So my book was one of the first, I've got it here, it was one of the first that really looked at a practitioner's guide to treating female genital mutilation. That's the first kind of research that I did, and it's come out in the book. But then after that, I think the next work, which I'm currently working with, is about working with the different forms of therapy we could have for female genital mutilation moving forward. So there's so much out there, and there's not enough, I think, work around the psychological aftermath, because the act is happening. Even now there's new reports saying that in Somalia, because of COVID, there's a rise of FGM, because everyone's in their homes, things are happening. So again, I think the most important thing about FGM is child abuse, and it's about being aware that this is child abuse and working with this as something that the perpetrators usually do be, their parents, unfortunately, in this case. Parents, the mother usually takes them to have this done. The father's very advocate around it. But bearing in mind, a lot of people are becoming more educated around FGM from different communities. So we have to take that in consideration. And one thing I think, when conversations have happened with people who have done FGM to their daughters, and we've had a conversation with their daughters around what FGM actually is, and actually there's no religious connotation to it. There is no, issues around it. So there's no, there's no actual, cleanliness, because I think some of the women also saw, in their cultures, in different cultures, depending on which culture they're from and who had FGM, they see the vagina as being clean if they have FGM done. So that's the kind of myths that were given to these women around why FGM needs to be done, or that their daughter won't get married. If you don't get FGM done, your daughter won't get married. So there's a lot of myths around that. And the more conversations, the more kind of psychoeducation around what FGM really is with the different ladies from different communities. And I know that a lot of activists have done a lot of work around FGM and having those conversations. A lot of women have agreed that actually it was a very traumatic experience for them, and they don't want their daughters to go through that, and they don't want to be, and understanding that there's not a religious connotation, and that actually it's more of a cultural, a male-dominated kind of thought around it, to change that. So I think there is a lot of change happening, but the reality is that it is continuing to happen, even though it's become illegal in many countries. And UK in itself, as you've seen, last year had their first conviction. So it's a very important conversation to have about FGM and female genital mutilation.
Wow, it's incredible to hear about the first conviction last year happening now. But at the same time, it's terrifying to hear that Corona, because a lot of people don't see the effects of Corona other than on unemployment.
Yeah.
But things like that are happening as well at the same time and are increasing. Domestic violence as well. No one talks about domestic violence. And I think it's really important to keep the conversation going, and your work is really essential. I will also put a link of your book below your YouTube video later, because I think it's really important for everyone really to read, because you are only as strong as the weakest link of your society. And if we allow such practices to being done in a country, it has nothing to do with accepting people's cultures. It is, as you said, this is a human rights issue, and it's infringing on children's rights, specifically girls. And it's and we all need to speak up. So also for people listening to this, if you know someone who has been going through that, who needs help, Dr. Farah is definitely the person to get in touch with. And also, if you know someone who will be experiencing this, if you are a mother listening to this, who is being pressured by your family that you need to do that to your daughter, or any other circumstances, please do get in touch. Because only by people who are being exposed to it, or people who know about these practices in their own circles, and stopping it, talking about it, only like that can it really be stopped. So our time has sadly run out. I could listen to you forever. I think it's such an interesting topic, a sad topic, but really important to be discussed. So we will talk offline more about this. Please get in touch with Dr. Farah, get her book if you can, and get in touch with her if you have more questions, or write me and I put you in touch with Dr. Farah Nadeem with great pleasure. So before I let you go, in a nutshell, very briefly, it's a very dark topic, to be honest.
Yeah.
Especially as a woman. What keeps you going to do the work you're doing?
Well, I think the most important thing is the human being itself. I think every person deserves the right to just be free and to have a choice. And I think in different communities and working the work that I do as a psychologist, giving a voice to the unheard is so important to me. And I think what keeps me going is the change of when I do my work and seeing the change on vulnerable individuals, and seeing them, say that, you saved my life today, or, if it wasn't for you, thank you so much. Like, my life has completely changed. And I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. Nadeem, for everything. That in itself for me is just, it's lovely to see that, people can change and change can happen, and everyone has a voice. And it's just about caring about the individual and seeing each individual as a human being, whether of their race, colour, background, and just, being there as a support, for other people is really important to me, in a way that I can provide help in the most empathetic way possible. And I think women, and giving a voice to young women who have never had a voice, is integral in the way that I work, as well as a voice for young men as well who haven't got that. I think it's not just about gender, but I think an FGM is for young women. And I think when you think about it, it's about giving a voice and giving them strength that they've never had before. The strength to say no, the strength to be like, actually, this is not okay. So I think my message to everyone is, you do have a voice, and just reach out for help if you need it. People are there. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with thousands of people I have worked with, with this issue and with a myriad of other psychological issues. So I'm just really grateful I've been given that platform, and I'm really grateful for you, Tessie, too. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much, Dr. Farah. And we will be talking offline. For everyone else, get in touch, leave your comments, please share. We need to spread the word and get Dr. Farah Nadeem's book. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this Zoom O'Clock. We hope this discussion was insightful and has provoked some new ideas for you. Please share and subscribe. If you like to keep in touch with your host, you can find her on Instagram under Tessie_from_Luxembourg and on Twitter under Tessie_DE.